Part 1. Breaking Free from Mental Chains. Hello, my friend. Stop right there. Before you scroll past this, answer me honestly. When was the last time your mind was actually quiet? Not distracted, not numb from exhaustion, but genuinely at peace. Can't remember? Yeah, I thought so. Here's what's happening right now. While you're reading this, there's a voice in your head. It's commenting on everything, judging, analyzing, worrying about something that happened yesterday or something that might happen tomorrow. And the worst part, you've gotten so used to that noise that you think it's normal. You think everyone lives like this. Constant mental static, an endless internal broadcast that never shuts off. But what if I told you that this chaos, this storm inside your skull, isn't something you have to live with forever? What if the key to inner peace isn't out there in some perfect life circumstance, but right here in understanding how your own mind works? Welcome back, friend. I'm so glad you're here for this conversation because today we're diving deep into something that could genuinely transform your entire existence. We're exploring the groundbreaking work of Dr. Helena Marsh and her book, The Art of a Quiet Mind with Positive Psychology. And let me be crystal clear about something. This isn't another one of those fluffy self-help books that tells you to slap a smile on your face and pretend everything's wonderful. This is about understanding the real architecture of mental peace and why most of us are carrying around a thunderstorm in our heads without even realizing we have a choice. So let's start with something uncomfortable right now, in this exact moment. What's bothering you the most? And I want you to really think about this. Don't give me the surface answer. Go deeper. If I pushed you on it, what would you say? Maybe it's your career and you feel stuck. Maybe it's a relationship that's draining you. Maybe it's money stress keeping you up at night. Maybe it's something you can't even quite name, just this generalized anxiety that follows you everywhere like a shadow. Now here's what Dr. Marsh wants us to understand, and this is going to sting a little. The biggest source of your mental turbulence isn't actually what's happening around you. It's not your circumstances, your job, your relationships, or your bank balance. The real problem is what you're desperately trying to control that was never, ever yours to control in the first place. Let me ask you something. How much time have you spent this week replaying conversations, analyzing what someone meant when they said that thing, wondering why they looked at you that way, rewriting your responses in your head, thinking, if only I had said this instead, or even worse, those brutal loops of regret that play on repeat. If only I had chosen differently. If only I had seen the signs. If only I could travel back to that moment and do it over. These thoughts don't just visit your mind briefly and leave. They move in, they unpack their bags, they redecorate. And before you know it, your mental space is so crowded with these invasive thoughts that even when you're sitting in complete silence on a Sunday afternoon, there's no peace to be found. Your head is screaming. Dr. Marsh has a term for this pattern. She calls it the control addiction, and it's systematically destroying our mental health one desperate attempt at a time. Let me paint you a vivid picture here. Imagine you're gripping a rope, both hands wrapped around it, knuckles white from the effort. On the other end of that rope is everything you're trying to control. your partner's feelings toward you, your boss's perception of your work, the outcome of that project you've poured months into, how your parents see you, the economy, traffic, other people's choices and reactions. Now here's the devastating truth. You're pulling on that rope with every ounce of strength you have. You're exhausted. Your muscles are burning. You're giving everything to drag all these things toward you, to make them behave the way you need them to. But the rope? It's not attached to anything on the other end. You're pulling against thin air, against variables that have absolutely zero connection to your effort. You're in a tug-of-war with ghosts. And the tragedy, the real heartbreak of this, is that we spend our entire lives doing exactly this. From childhood, we're programmed to believe that control equals success. Study harder, control your future, work longer hours, control your career trajectory, be a better person, control how the world treats you. We're fed this narrative, this complete lie, that if we just try hard enough, plan meticulously enough, sacrifice relentlessly enough, we can bend reality to match our expectations. But reality doesn't work that way. Reality is messy. It's unpredictable. It's influenced by thousands of factors that have nothing whatsoever to do with you. The people in your life aren't characters in your personal screenplay that you can script and direct. They have their own wounds, their own fears, their own histories that shape every decision they make. But we take it all personally, don't we? Someone doesn't respond to your message, and suddenly you're spiraling. Do they hate me now? Did I say something wrong? Am I not important enough to warrant a reply? Someone criticizes your work, and you absorb it as confirmation that you're fundamentally inadequate. Someone you love behaves in ways that hurt you, and instead of establishing boundaries, you contort yourself into impossible shapes trying to fix them. You think, if I just love them harder, sacrifice more, adjust my behavior enough, they'll finally change. This is where the mental exhaustion begins. This is where anxiety plants its roots deep and starts growing. And then there's the past. Oh, the past. We understand logically that what's done is done. The past is a sealed vault, a finished book. But our minds don't care about logic, do they? Our minds are time machines, constantly pulling us backward. Every single day, your brain will resurrect old scenes like a film on endless repeat. That argument from 5 years ago, that relationship that crashed and burned, that opportunity you let slip through your fingers, that mistake you can't take back. And it doesn't just show you the memory neutrally. It provides commentary, brutal, vicious commentary. You idiot! You should have seen it coming. You destroyed everything. Dr. Marsh describes this pattern as voluntary suffering. And I love this term because it sounds harsh, but it's actually empowering. You're not being forced to relive these moments. You're choosing to. And I know that might sound confrontational, but stay with me here, because understanding that you're choosing this means you also have the power to choose differently. You can choose to stop. Here's what happens in our minds when we attempt to control the uncontrollable. We create what feels like power. We think, if I worry about this intensely enough, I can prevent disaster. If I analyze this situation from every conceivable angle, I'll finally understand what went wrong and how to fix it. But worrying isn't planning. Overthinking isn't problem solving. It's just mental chaos wearing a disguise called productivity. So, how do we begin to let go? Dr. Marsh says it starts with one simple but absolutely profound question. In this specific situation, what is genuinely within my control and what is not? Most people cannot answer this question with any clarity because we've been conditioned from birth to believe that everything is our responsibility. Someone insults you? You think it's your job to prove them wrong. Someone abandons you? You think it's your fault. A project fails? You think you should have done more, been more, sacrificed more. But let's break this down together. Someone insults you. That event, their words, their tone, their decision to be cruel, none of that was in your control. It happened. It's done. It's in the past. But here's what is in your control: the story you tell yourself about that insult. You can choose to attach it to your sense of self-worth and spiral into shame and self-doubt. Or you can choose to see it for exactly what it is: a reflection of that person's pain, their limitations, their insecurities, not yours. This tiny gap between the external event and your internal reaction, that's where your freedom exists. That's where your actual power lives. Now, I want to pause here and address something crucial, because a lot of people here let it go and immediately think it means being passive. They think it means giving up, rolling over, accepting abuse, becoming emotionally detached or cold. But that's not what letting go is at all. Letting go is one of the bravest, most courageous things a human being can do. It takes immense strength to walk away from a relationship that's slowly poisoning you. It takes guts to stop trying to control someone who refuses to grow or change. It takes real courage to release the past and stop punishing yourself for things that cannot be undone. We stay stuck because we're terrified. Terrified of loneliness, terrified of what people will say, terrified of admitting we were wrong, terrified of the unknown. So we cling. We cling to relationships that are destroying us piece by piece. We cling to resentment because it feels safer than the vulnerability of forgiveness. We cling to control because letting go feels like free falling into an abyss. But here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you release your grip on the uncontrollable, you actually gain control. Not over external circumstances, but over yourself, over your reactions, over your peace of mind, over where you invest your precious energy. And that, my friend, is the only control that ever actually mattered. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you're in a relationship where the other person is emotionally unavailable. They're inconsistent. One day, they're fully present and loving. The next day, they're distant and cold. You try everything in your toolkit. You communicate more clearly. You give them space. You support them unconditionally. You love them harder. But nothing fundamentally changes. Now, here's the question Dr. Marsh wants you to ask. Can you control whether they heal their emotional wounds? Can you control whether they choose to show up for you consistently? The answer is no. You absolutely cannot. The only thing you can control is whether you continue to accept that behavior, whether you continue to pour yourself into a dynamic that's emptying you out. And this is where letting go becomes an act of profound self-respect, not selfishness. You're not abandoning them. You're choosing not to abandon yourself. Dr. Marsh talks extensively about toxic relationships as the ultimate example of trying to control the uncontrollable. You can love someone deeply. You can support them generously. You can encourage their growth, but you cannot heal them if they don't want to be healed. And yet we try. We make ourselves responsible for other people's growth and transformation. We think, if I just adjust a little more, sacrifice a little more, maybe they'll finally become who I need them to be. But they won't, because change doesn't work that way. Change is an inside job, and no amount of external pressure from you will make someone do their inner work if they're not ready. So you exhaust yourself. You lose pieces of who you are. You become smaller and smaller, hoping that your shrinking will somehow make them grow. And in the process, you forget who you were before this relationship consumed your entire identity. Letting go here isn't cruelty. It's clarity. It's saying, I love you, but I love myself too. And I refuse to drown while trying to save someone who isn't even reaching for the lifeboat I'm throwing them. Now let's talk about other people's opinions, because this is another massive area where we hemorrhage energy, trying to control the uncontrollable. What will people think? What will they say? How will they judge me? These questions run our entire lives. We make decisions based not on what we authentically want, but on what we think will earn approval. We dim our dreams because we're terrified of criticism. We edit our personalities because we're afraid of rejection. We play small because we're convinced that's safer than standing out. But here's the truth that will set you free. People are going to have opinions no matter what you do. You could be the kindest, most generous, most successful person on the planet, and someone somewhere will still find a reason to criticize you. Someone will still think you're doing it wrong. So if you're going to be judged anyway, if criticism is inevitable regardless of your choices, wouldn't it make infinitely more sense to live according to your own values instead of someone else's expectations? Other people's opinions are not facts. They're interpretations. And those interpretations are shaped by their experiences, their insecurities, their biases, their wounds, not by your actual worth. When you truly understand this, criticism loses its devastating sting. It stops being a reflection of you and becomes simply information about them. Letting go doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It doesn't mean you pretend nothing hurts. Pain is real. Anger is real. Disappointment is real. And all of those feelings are completely valid and deserve to be acknowledged. But letting go means you feel those emotions without letting them move in permanently. You acknowledge the pain. You sit with it. You let it teach you what it came to teach you, and then you allow it to pass through and move on. Emotions are meant to be visitors, not permanent residents. They're meant to flow through you, not set up camp and stay forever. When we hold on to uncontrollable things, our present suffers enormously. Physically, we're here in this moment, but mentally, we're stuck in the past or lost in an imaginary future. Someone is sitting right in front of us trying to connect, but we're not really listening because we're replaying yesterday's argument or rehearsing tomorrow's confrontation. This is why so many of us feel profoundly disconnected, not because we're alone, but because we're never fully present. We're never actually here. Letting go brings you back to now, and now is the only place where life actually happens. The past is a memory. The future is a possibility. But now, this moment right here, this is where your power lives. This is where your life is actually unfolding. Word count for Part 1, 2,450 words, continuing to reach 3,000 words. Your reactions are within your control, and that's more powerful than you realize. Most people believe that reactions are automatic. Something triggers you and boom, you explode, you lash out, you shut down, you spiral. But reactions can be trained. They can be slowed down. They can be chosen. The next time something triggers you, try this. Take a deep breath, just one conscious breath. And in that breath, in that tiny pause, ask yourself 2 questions. Will this matter in 5 years? Am I giving this person's behavior more power than my own peace? That pause, that minuscule moment of space between stimulus and response, can change absolutely everything. Our ego is another massive roadblock to letting go. The ego desperately wants to be right. It wants to win every argument. It wants the other person to admit they were wrong and apologize. But not every battle is worth fighting. Sometimes peace is infinitely more valuable than being right. Sometimes silence is more powerful than having the last word. Letting go of the past is especially difficult because we tie it to our identity. We think what happened to me is who I am. But you are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to be right now in this moment. The past can be a teacher, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be a prison. Why would you sacrifice today for something that cannot be changed? Letting go is a process, not a one-time decision. Some days you'll feel strong and clear. Other days, old thoughts will creep back in like unwelcome guests. And that's okay. That's human. Every time the thought returns, gently let it go. Don't judge yourself for having it. Practice self-compassion. You're not a machine. You're a human being trying to heal. When you start letting go of the uncontrollable, something magical happens. Life feels lighter. The same problems exist, sure, but they don't weigh you down the same way. You stop taking everything personally. You start seeing that most people are fighting their own internal battles, and their behavior toward you often has absolutely nothing to do with you at all. The biggest freedom comes when you accept this fundamental truth. You can't make everyone happy. You can't fix everything. You can't undo every mistake. But you can choose your response. You can decide where to invest your energy, and you can choose peace over control. Life isn't about control. It's about choice. Control is an illusion. Choice is reality. And when you let go of the uncontrollable, you finally step into real control. Control over your mind, your emotions, your peace. Letting go doesn't make you cold or indifferent. It makes you wise. It makes you more aware of where to invest your energy and where to walk away. You don't fight every battle that presents itself, but when something truly matters, when it aligns with your values, you stand your ground with full strength. In the end, letting go isn't a loss. It's an exchange. You trade anxiety for peace. You trade overthinking for clarity. You trade chaos for inner silence. And that silence, that quiet mind, is the most powerful thing you can cultivate in this noisy world. Part 2. Action over outcome. Escaping the anxiety trap. All right, so we've explored the power of releasing what we cannot control. But now, let's tackle the elephant in the room, anxiety. Specifically, the particular breed of anxiety that comes from obsessing over outcomes instead of focusing on what we're actually doing in this present moment. Here's something most people don't realize. The vast majority of our anxiety isn't about the present moment at all. It's about the future. Think about it for a second. You're sitting here right now, reading this or listening to this. Are you in immediate danger right now? Probably not. Is something catastrophic happening to you in this exact moment? Most likely, no. So, where is all that anxiety actually coming from? It's coming from your mind racing ahead, projecting into a future that doesn't even exist yet. What if this doesn't work out? What if I fail spectacularly? What if people judge me? What if I'm not good enough? What if everything falls apart? These aren't questions about now. These are ghosts of an imaginary future haunting your present moment. And here's the truly devastating part. While you're busy worrying about tomorrow, you are completely missing today. You're sacrificing the only moment you actually have for a moment that might never even arrive. Dr. Marsh introduces a concept that sounds deceptively simple, but is absolutely revolutionary when you actually apply it to your life. Action over outcome. This means fundamentally shifting your entire focus from the result you're desperately hoping for to the action you're taking right now, in this moment. When you're fully immersed in doing, when you're completely absorbed in the process, fear doesn't have room to breathe. It gets crowded out by presence. Let me explain why this works on a neurological level. We've been raised in an outcome-obsessed culture. From childhood, everything has been about results, about destinations. Study hard so you can get excellent grades. Get excellent grades so you can get into a prestigious college. Get into a prestigious college so you can land an impressive job. Get an impressive job so you can get promoted. Get promoted so you can finally feel successful and worthy. Everything is a means to an end. Nothing is valuable for its own sake. We've been trained to see the journey as just a necessary, often tedious inconvenience before we reach the destination. And because of this deeply ingrained conditioning, we don't actually experience our lives as they're happening. We're always one step ahead, planning, worrying, calculating, strategizing. We read a book, but we're more focused on finishing it than actually absorbing the wisdom on each page. We work on a project, but we're so stressed about the outcome that we don't enjoy the creative process. We're in conversations with people we care about, but we're already thinking about what we're going to say next, instead of truly listening. This is absolutely exhausting, and it's the primary fuel source for chronic anxiety. Here's what happens when you're outcome-focused. Your mind immediately jumps to the end before you've even started. Let's say you're preparing for an important presentation at work. Instead of focusing on researching thoroughly, organizing your thoughts coherently, and practicing your delivery, your brain instantly fast-forwards to the moment you're standing in front of everyone. And then it spirals catastrophically. What if I mess up? What if I forget my key points? What if they think I'm incompetent? What if this ruins my professional reputation? What if I get fired? Notice something crucial here. None of these thoughts are helpful. They don't improve your preparation. They don't make you more confident or capable. They just paralyze you with fear. Because the outcome, the actual moment of the presentation, is not in your control. You can't control how people will react. You can't control if the technology will malfunction. You can't control if someone will ask a question you don't know the answer to. You can't control a million variables that will influence how it goes. The only thing you can genuinely control is how well you prepare. The action, the now, the process. Dr. Marsh teaches that when anxiety hits hard, you need to pull yourself back to this one grounding question. What can I do right now, in this moment? Not tomorrow, not after everything is perfect, not when I feel ready. Right now, what's the next small step? Maybe it's sending one email. Maybe it's reading one page. Maybe it's making one phone call. Maybe it's writing one paragraph. It doesn't have to be huge or dramatic. It just has to be real, concrete, actionable. Because small, consistent actions are what build significant outcomes. But we can't see that when we're too busy staring at the distant mountaintop, panicking about how we'll ever get there. Let's get brutally honest for a second. The reason we obsess over outcomes is because we've tied our entire identity to results. We believe deep down in our core that we're only valuable if we succeed, if we win, if we achieve impressive things, if we impress other people. So every task becomes a referendum on our worth as human beings. Every project is a test of whether we deserve to exist. Every attempt is pass or fail, and failure means we're fundamentally defective. No wonder we're drowning in anxiety. We've turned life into a high-stakes exam where our entire sense of self is on the line with every single thing we do. But what if your identity wasn't tied to outcomes at all? What if it was tied to effort instead? What if you saw yourself as someone who shows up, who tries, who puts in genuine work regardless of the result? That shift changes absolutely everything, because now whether you win or lose, whether you succeed or fail, you still respect yourself. The outcome becomes secondary. Your integrity, your effort, your consistency, that becomes primary. That becomes what defines you. A lot of people don't even start pursuing their dreams because they're terrified of the outcome. They think, what if I give this my absolute all and it still doesn't work out? What if I try my hardest and still fail? That will hurt even more than not trying at all. So they don't try. They protect themselves from potential pain by never putting themselves out there in the first place. But that's just another insidious form of outcome obsession. You're so focused on avoiding a bad result that you rob yourself of the experience altogether. When you adopt an action-based mindset, starting becomes infinitely easier. You're not telling yourself, I need to conquer the world today. You're just saying, I need to do this one thing right now. That's it. Just this. And that's manageable. That doesn't trigger the same overwhelming level of fear. There's a psychological state called flow. You've probably experienced it before, maybe without knowing what it was called. It's when you're so completely absorbed in what you're doing that time disappears. Hours feel like minutes. You're not thinking about the outcome. You're not worried about what people will think. You're just doing. You're fully present in the action. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists call it being lost in the work. Dr. Marsh calls it the natural result of action-focused living. Flow cannot exist when you're obsessed with outcomes because flow requires you to be fully present. And if you're constantly peeking ahead, checking the scoreboard, wondering if you're good enough, you pull yourself out of the present moment. You fracture your attention into 1,000 pieces, and anxiety rushes in to fill that gap. Now, let me be absolutely clear about something important. Action over outcome doesn't mean you stop caring about results. It doesn't mean results don't matter at all. Of course they matter. We're human beings with goals and dreams and aspirations, but here's the critical distinction. Results are not fully in your control. You can give your absolute best effort. You can execute flawlessly, and the outcome can still be influenced by timing, by luck, by other people, by circumstances completely beyond your control. If you attach your peace of mind solely to results, then every uncontrollable variable becomes a threat to your mental health. Every factor you can't influence becomes a source of anxiety. The people who succeed long-term, who build sustainable careers and fulfilling lives, aren't the ones who are obsessed with winning. They're the ones who fall in love with the process. The writer writes because they love the craft of writing, not just because they want a bestseller. The athlete trains because they love the discipline and the growth, not just for the medal. The entrepreneur builds because they love creating value, not just for the money. When you genuinely enjoy the process, the journey itself becomes inherently meaningful. The destination is just a bonus, not the entire point of the journey. Social media has made outcome obsession exponentially worse. We only see people's highlight reels. The success, the money, the awards, the finished product that looks effortless. We don't see the years of boring, repetitive practice. We don't see the countless failures. We don't see the days when they wanted to quit. We don't see the rejection and the setbacks. So we think, if I'm not seeing dramatic results quickly, I must be doing something wrong. I must not be talented enough. I should just give up. But that's not how genuine growth works. Every significant achievement is built on thousands of small, unsexy actions that nobody ever sees. The iceberg principle. What people see on the surface is only a tiny fraction of what exists beneath. Focusing on action also fundamentally changes your self-talk. Instead of saying, I have to succeed at this or I'm worthless, you say, I'm going to give today my best effort, and that's enough. That language reduces pressure dramatically. It shifts your brain from threat mode into learning mode. And when you're in learning mode, you're open, curious, creative, adaptive. When you're in threat mode, you're rigid, scared, defensive, paralyzed. Here's a practical exercise Dr. Marsh recommends that I've found incredibly helpful. Whenever you feel anxiety rising, ask yourself one simple question. What is one thing I can do right now? Notice the question isn't, how do I guarantee success? Or how do I make absolutely sure nothing goes wrong? It's simply, what can I do now? The answer might be small and seemingly insignificant. Make a list, send a text, take a walk, do 10 minutes of research, drink some water, take 3 deep breaths. But that small action grounds you. It pulls you out of the imaginary future and plants you firmly back in reality, in the present moment where you actually have agency. Outcome obsession also makes us desperately impatient. We want immediate results. We want to see tangible progress right away. We want validation that we're on the right path. But real growth is slow. It's incremental. It's often invisible for long stretches of time, happening beneath the surface where you can't see it. When you focus primarily on action, patience develops naturally because your satisfaction comes from the effort itself, not just from external validation or visible results. When you're action-focused, comparison also decreases significantly. You're not constantly measuring yourself against other people's results, their timelines, their achievements. You're measuring yourself by one simple question. Did I show up today? Did I do the work I committed to doing? If the answer is yes, then your day was successful regardless of the outcome. That's a complete game changer for your mental health. This mindset also cultivates genuine humility. When success comes, you don't get arrogant or entitled because you understand it wasn't just you. Timing played a role. Luck played a role. Other people played a role. Circumstances aligned in ways you couldn't control. And when failure comes, you don't completely collapse because you know you did your part. You showed up. You gave your effort. You took action. That's all you can ever truly control. And that realization brings profound emotional stability. You're not riding the roller coaster of external validation anymore, where one success makes you feel invincible and one failure makes you feel worthless. You're grounded in your own integrity, your own effort, your own consistency. Over time, you'll notice that the sheer intensity of anxiety decreases. Fear doesn't disappear completely, and that would be unrealistic to expect. But it stops controlling you. It stops dictating your choices. You learn to act even when you're afraid. And that, my friend, is real courage. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Life is not an exam where only the final grade matters. Life is not a destination you're racing toward. Life is a practice ground. It's the daily effort that shapes you, not just the occasional trophy or achievement. When you loosen your grip on outcomes and hold tightly to your actions, life starts to feel infinitely more manageable. Less like a high-stakes gamble where everything's on the line, and more like a series of choices you get to make every single day. Here's the reminder you might desperately need to hear right now. Your job is to try, not to guarantee success. The universe asks for your effort, not your perfection. When you truly accept that, when you internalize that truth, the crushing weight of anxiety starts to lift. You begin living in the present moment, and that present, lived fully and consciously, gradually builds the future you were so worried about. But here's the beautiful irony. The future you create through present-focused action is often significantly better than the one you were trying to force through anxiety and control. Because when you're truly present, you're clear. When you're clear, you make better decisions. When you make better decisions, better outcomes naturally follow. Not because you're obsessing over them, but because you're no longer getting in your own way. So let's make a deal, you and I. For the next week, try this experiment. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into what-if thinking, pause, take one conscious breath, and ask yourself, what's one action I can take right now? Just one. And then do it. Don't think about whether it's enough. Don't think about the outcome. Just do that one thing, and then the next, and then the next. You'll be amazed at how much mental noise disappears when you stop trying to predict and control the future and start genuinely participating in the now. Part 3. The Art of Slowing Down, Reclaiming Your Mind from the Rush. Let's talk about speed. Our world is moving faster than it ever has before in human history. And I don't just mean technology or the pace of change in society. I mean us. We're moving faster, thinking faster, reacting faster, living faster. And we've convinced ourselves that this is normal, that this is just how modern life is, that there's no alternative. You wake up in the morning, and before your eyes are even fully open, you're reaching for your phone. It's become such an ingrained habit that you don't even think about it anymore. Notifications flood in immediately. Emails demanding your attention. Messages requiring responses. News headlines screaming for your focus. You scroll through social media while you're brushing your teeth. You eat breakfast while checking your schedule for the day. You drive to work while your mind is already 3 meetings ahead, planning conversations that haven't happened yet. The entire day becomes a blur of multitasking, racing from one thing to the next, never fully present anywhere, never fully here. And then night comes. You're physically exhausted, completely drained, but your brain won't shut off. It's still racing, still processing, still planning tomorrow before today is even properly over. You lie in bed, physically still, but mentally sprinting through an endless to-do list, and you wonder why you can't sleep, why you feel so tired, even though you haven't really done anything that's physically demanding. Dr. Marsh calls this phenomenon the velocity trap. We've mistaken speed for productivity, busyness for importance, constant motion for actual progress. But here's the uncomfortable truth that most people don't want to face. Speed is often the enemy of peace. And if you genuinely want a quiet mind, you're going to have to learn how to slow down. Now, I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. Slow down? Are you serious? I can't slow down. I have deadlines. I have responsibilities. I have people depending on me. If I slow down, I'll fall behind. I'll lose my competitive edge. I'll miss opportunities. And I get it. I really do. We live in a culture that glorifies the hustle, that treats rest like laziness, that makes you feel guilty for taking a single breath. But let me ask you this. How's that working out for you? Are you happy? Are you calm? Are you present? Or are you just surviving, running on fumes, one breakdown away from burning out completely? Slowing down isn't about doing less, though sometimes that's necessary too. It's about being more present with what you're actually doing. It's about quality over quantity. It's about depth over breadth. It's about reclaiming your attention from the constant fragmentation that modern life demands. Let me paint you a vivid picture of what I mean. Imagine you're eating lunch, really eating, not scrolling through your phone, not watching a video, not thinking about your next meeting or replaying your last conversation. Just eating, tasting the food, noticing the textures, the flavors, the temperature, chewing slowly, being fully there with that simple act. When was the last time you did that? When was the last time you did anything with your complete, undivided attention? Most of us can't even remember because we've trained ourselves to be everywhere except where we actually are. We're physically in one place, but mentally scattered across a dozen different places simultaneously. And that fragmentation, that constant splitting of attention, is absolutely exhausting. It's why you can spend a whole day not doing much of anything concrete and still feel completely drained by the end of it. Dr. Marsh explained that slowing down isn't really about your body at all. It's about your mind. You can walk slowly, talk slowly, Move through your day at a leisurely pace. But if your thoughts are still racing at 100 miles per hour, you're not actually slow. You're just a fast mind trapped in a slower body. The real goal is to slow the thinking itself, to create space between thoughts, to let each moment breathe before rushing frantically to the next one. We live in an era of instant everything, instant messages, instant answers, instant entertainment, instant gratification. We've completely lost the ability to wait, to sit with uncertainty, to be bored. The moment we have a free second, even just standing in line at the grocery store, we reach for our phones. We can't handle silence. We can't handle stillness. We've become addicted to constant stimulation. And like any addiction, it takes more and more to satisfy us. The tolerance builds. This addiction to speed creates a baseline of anxiety that we don't even notice anymore. It's just there, humming constantly in the background, a perpetual low-level stress that we've normalized. We think it's just how things are, but it's not. It's a choice we're making over and over again without even realizing it. When you intentionally slow down, the first thing you'll feel is profound discomfort. Your mind will panic. It'll tell you that you're wasting precious time, that you should be doing something productive, that you're falling behind while everyone else races ahead. This is completely normal. This is your nervous system protesting the change, resisting the unfamiliar. But here's what's actually happening beneath that resistance. You're teaching your body that there is no emergency, that it's safe to relax, that not everything is urgent, that the world won't collapse if you take a moment to breathe. Anxiety thrives on the illusion of urgency. It convinces you that something terrible is about to happen, that you need to stay on high alert constantly. But when you deliberately slow down, you send a different signal to your entire nervous system. You tell your body, we're okay. Nothing is chasing us. We can breathe. We can be here. And gradually, incrementally, the nervous system begins to recalibrate. One of the biggest benefits of slowing down is clarity. When everything is moving fast, your thinking becomes shallow. You skim the surface of things. You react instead of respond. You make decisions based on impulse rather than reflection. But when you slow down your thinking, you see things more clearly. You notice details you would have completely missed. You make connections you wouldn't have made. You respond with wisdom instead of reacting with fear. We often say, I don't have time. But the truth is, we do have time. What we don't have is attention. We're trying to do too many things at once, and in doing so, we're not really doing any of them well. Multitasking has become a badge of honor in our society. We think it makes us efficient, productive, impressive. But science tells us the exact opposite. Multitasking decreases productivity and increases stress dramatically. It fragments your brain and prevents you from entering deep focus, from experiencing flow. Slowing down gives you permission to do one thing at a time. And when you give something your full, undivided attention, it gets done faster and significantly better than if you were half present while juggling 3 other things. Let's talk about the fundamental difference between fast thinking and slow thinking. Fast thinking is reactive. It's driven by fear, by the urgent need to protect yourself, by the pressure to respond immediately. Slow thinking is reflective. It's driven by awareness, by curiosity, by the willingness to pause before acting. Fast thinking says, I need to fix this right now. Slow thinking says, let me understand what's actually happening here before I react. Both have their place. There are genuine emergencies that require fast thinking, but most of us live almost exclusively in fast thinking mode. We're so used to reacting instantly that we've completely forgotten how to reflect. And that's where mistakes happen. That's where relationships break down. That's where we say things we deeply regret, make decisions we wish we could take back, burn bridges we didn't mean to burn. Slowing down creates a gap, a pause, a moment of precious space between stimulus and response. And in that space, wisdom emerges. You stop being controlled by your immediate impulses. You stop letting other people's reactions dictate your behavior. You become intentional, and intention is the foundation of a quiet mind. Social media has trained us to react instantly. Someone posts something, and within seconds, we're expected to have an opinion, to like, comment, share, engage. We've been conditioned to reward speed over thoughtfulness, instant reaction over considered response. But here's what that does to us over time. It turns us into reaction machines. We're not actually thinking. We're just responding automatically, reflexively, and every reaction drains our energy, fragments our attention, pulls us further from center. Slowing down teaches you that not everything deserves a response. Not every post needs your comment. Not every argument needs your input. Not every opinion needs to be challenged. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. Sometimes walking away is the wisest move. When you slow down your pace intentionally, you start noticing things you've been missing for years. The way the morning light filters through your window, the sound of birds outside, the smell of coffee brewing, the smile on a stranger's face, the texture of the fabric you're wearing. These small moments have always been there, quietly existing, but you were moving too fast to see them. And these small moments, they're where peace actually lives. Not in some grand achievement or distant future. Right here in the tiny, ordinary details of everyday life. Anxiety lives in the future, in the what-ifs and the catastrophic predictions. Slowing down brings you back to the present. And the present is where life actually happens. Not in the past, which is already gone. Not in the future, which doesn't exist yet. Only now. Only here. And when you're fully in the now, anxiety doesn't have much room to operate. Slowing down also heals relationships in profound ways. When you slow down your speech, when you listen without interrupting, when you're fully present with someone, they feel it. They feel safe. They feel seen. They feel valued. Most conflicts happen not because people fundamentally disagree, but because they're not really listening to each other. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. They're already formulating their response while the other person is still speaking. That's not genuine communication. That's parallel monologues happening in the same room. Slow listening is infinitely more powerful than fast talking. When you genuinely listen, not to win, not to fix, not to judge, but just to understand, the entire dynamic shifts. Connection happens. And connection is the antidote to loneliness, which is one of the biggest drivers of anxiety in modern life. Now, I want to address a fear that comes up when people hear slow down. They think, if I slow down, I'll fall behind. Everyone else is moving fast. I can't afford to be slow. I'll lose opportunities. I'll miss out. But here's the truth that nobody talks about. The people who understand their own pace, who move sustainably, who don't burn themselves out, they're the ones who last. They're the ones still standing when everyone else has collapsed from exhaustion. Burnout happens to people who are constantly pushing, constantly sprinting, never allowing themselves to rest or recover. Slowing down doesn't make you weak. It makes you sustainable. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you try to sprint a marathon, you'll collapse long before you reach the finish line. Dr. Marsh emphasizes that slowing down is ultimately a choice. The world isn't going to slow down for you. Notifications will keep coming. Demands will keep piling up. Pressure will keep building. But you can decide that you're not going to match that frantic pace. You can decide that you don't have to respond to every message immediately. You don't have to say yes to every request. You don't have to be available 24/7. These small boundaries protect your mental health. They create desperately needed space for you to breathe. When you slow down, you also start listening to your body in ways you've been ignoring for years. Your body has been giving you signals. Signals of exhaustion, signals of stress, signals of emotional overload. But you've been ignoring them because you're too busy, too rushed, too focused on keeping up with everyone else. Slowing down reconnects you with yourself. And self-connection is the greatest antidote to anxiety that exists. Here's something beautiful to consider. The most meaningful experiences in life happen slowly. Love doesn't happen in an instant. Deep understanding doesn't come in a rush. Creativity doesn't flourish under constant pressure. Healing doesn't happen overnight. All of these require time. They require space. They require patience. When you're constantly in a hurry, rushing from one thing to the next, you turn these profound experiences into shallow versions of themselves. You skim the surface instead of diving deep into the richness that's available. Slowing down gives you depth, and depth is where meaning lives, where fulfillment exists. Over time, as you practice slowing down consistently, you'll notice that your mind isn't as noisy anymore. Thoughts still come, obviously, but they don't race frantically. They don't pile on top of each other in overwhelming chaos. They arrive, they're acknowledged, and they pass. You don't chase them desperately. You don't fight them. You just watch them come and go like clouds passing through the sky. This is what inner silence actually feels like. Not the complete absence of thought, but the absence of mental chaos and turbulence. Dr. Marsh teaches that the art of slowing down is ultimately about understanding one fundamental truth. Speed and urgency are not the same thing. What's truly important often moves slowly. What moves fast is usually superficial, fleeting, ultimately forgettable. When you internalize this truth deeply, you can slow down without guilt. You can rest without shame. You can be still without feeling like you're wasting precious time. In the end, slowing down isn't a luxury reserved for people with easy lives. It's a survival skill. It's how you stay sane in a world that's specifically designed to overwhelm you. When you consciously slow your pace, you step off the autopilot of anxiety. You stop running a race that nobody actually wins, and you start experiencing your life instead of just rushing through it on your way to somewhere else. That's where peace is, not at some distant finish line. Right here in the slow, steady present moment. Part 4. CBT and Becoming Your Own Advocate. Transforming Your Inner Dialogue. All right, let's dive into something that might completely revolutionize how you relate to your own mind. We're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. Now, before you check out thinking this is going to be some dry clinical lecture full of technical jargon, stay with me, because the way Dr. Marsh talks about CBT isn't about fixing your supposedly broken brain. It's not about correcting faulty thinking like you're some kind of malfunctioning computer that needs debugging. It's about something much more profound and transformative. Curiosity. Most people think CBT is about identifying negative thoughts and mechanically replacing them with positive ones. Like your mind is full of errors that need to be corrected, bugs that need to be fixed. But Dr. Marsh approaches it completely differently. She sees CBT as a tool for inquiry, a way to become genuinely curious about your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. It's not about fighting your mind or going to war with your thinking. It's about having an honest, compassionate conversation with it. Here's the thing that most people don't realize. Every single day, hundreds upon hundreds of thoughts pass through your mind. Some fleeting, some persistent, some helpful, some destructive. And here's the problem. We believe most of them automatically. If your mind says you're not good enough, you believe it without question. If it says something terrible is definitely going to happen, you panic. If it says everyone is judging you harshly, you shrink and hide. We take thoughts at face value as if they're undeniable facts, as if just because you thought it, it must be objectively true. But thoughts aren't facts. They're interpretations. They're stories your mind is telling based on past experiences, on fears, on biases, on incomplete information, and sometimes just on random mental noise that doesn't mean anything at all. The question Dr. Marsh wants you to start asking consistently is this: where did this thought actually come from? What's the real evidence for it? Is this a verifiable fact, or is this just my imagination running completely wild? This is where CBT begins, not with suppression, not with denial, not with forcing positivity, but with genuine inquiry, with curiosity. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you have a big presentation coming up at work and a thought pops into your head. I'm going to mess this up. I always mess things up. I'm terrible at this. Most people would hear that thought and immediately feel their confidence collapse entirely. Their heart rate would spike. They'd start catastrophizing, imagining every possible way they could fail spectacularly. And by the time they actually get to the presentation, they've already convinced themselves it's going to be a complete disaster. But CBT asks a fundamentally different question. Instead of accepting that thought as absolute truth, you pause, you take a breath, and you ask, is that actually true? Do I always mess things up? What's the concrete evidence for that claim? Have there been times when I did well? What makes this time different from those times? And here's what usually happens when you actually examine the thought closely. It falls apart. It crumbles. Because it's not based on reality. It's based on fear. It's based on one or two past experiences that your mind has generalized into a universal truth about who you are. But one failure doesn't mean you always fail. One mistake doesn't define your entire capability as a human being. This process of questioning your thoughts, of putting them on trial, is what Dr. Marsh calls interrogating your narratives. Imagine your mind is a courtroom. A thought walks in confidently and makes a claim about reality, about you, about your future. Instead of automatically believing it, you ask it to present evidence. You cross-examine it like a skilled lawyer. You look for holes in its argument. You check for logical fallacies. And if it can't back up its claims with solid evidence, you dismiss it. This might sound cold or overly analytical, but it's actually incredibly liberating. Because once you realize that most of your anxious thoughts don't hold up under scrutiny, they lose their power over you. They stop feeling like absolute truths and start feeling like what they really are, just thoughts, mental events, temporary visitors in your mind. Here's what makes CBT so powerful as a tool for inquiry. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't say, "You're thinking wrong. Stop it. What's wrong with you?" It just says, "Let's investigate this together. Let's see what's really going on here." And that shift from harsh judgment to gentle curiosity changes absolutely everything. Because curiosity is the natural enemy of anxiety. When you're anxious, you're closed off, defensive, reactive, panicking. When you're curious, you're open, exploratory, grounded, learning. Dr. Marsh describes our minds as incredibly skilled storytellers. They take incomplete information and weave entire elaborate narratives around it. Someone doesn't text you back immediately, and your mind creates a whole story. They're mad at me. I did something wrong. They don't like me anymore. I'm being abandoned. You make one mistake at work, and your mind creates a dramatic story. I'm going to get fired. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. My career is over. I've ruined everything. These stories feel intensely real. They trigger real emotions, real physical responses. But they're not facts. They're interpretations based on incomplete data. And CBT helps you slow down that automatic storytelling process. It asks, is this the only possible explanation? Could there be other reasons for what happened? Am I jumping to catastrophic conclusions based on incomplete information? Most of the time, the honest answer is yes. There are other explanations. Many other explanations. Maybe that person is just busy with their own life. Maybe they didn't see your message. Maybe they're dealing with their own struggles that have absolutely nothing to do with you. But your anxious mind went straight to the worst-case scenario. Because that's what anxious minds do reflexively. They scan constantly for threats. They catastrophize automatically. They assume the worst to try to protect you from potential disappointment. But here's the cruel irony. In trying to protect you, your anxious mind actually makes you suffer more, because you end up living through disasters that never actually happen, experiencing pain from events that exist only in your imagination. Now, let me be absolutely clear about something important. CBT isn't about forcing positive thinking. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. It's not about replacing "I'm going to fail" with "everything is going to be absolutely perfect," because that's not realistic either. That's just swapping one extreme distortion for another. What CBT teaches is realistic thinking, balanced thinking, neither catastrophic nor blindly optimistic, just grounded in actual reality. So when you have the thought, This presentation might not go well. CBT doesn't tell you to think it's going to be amazing. Instead, it helps you think something like, I've prepared as much as I can with the time I had. I might make some mistakes, and that's okay because I'm human. I've done presentations before, and most of them went reasonably well. Even if this one isn't perfect, it won't be the end of the world or my career. See the difference? One thought is rooted in fear and catastrophe. One is rooted in false optimism and denial, and one is rooted in balanced reality. And reality is where peace lives. CBT also helps you identify what Dr. Marsh calls cognitive distortions, patterns of thinking that systematically distort reality and fuel anxiety. Let me walk you through a few of the most common ones because I guarantee you're doing at least a couple of these without even realizing it. All or nothing thinking. This is when you see everything in black and white categories with no middle ground. You're either perfect or you're a complete failure. Someone either loves you or hates you. An experience is either amazing or terrible. There's no nuance, no gray area, no complexity. Overgeneralization. This is when you take one negative experience and turn it into a universal rule that applies to everything forever. You fail at something once, and suddenly you're convinced you'll fail at everything always. One person rejects you, and you decide you're fundamentally unlovable. One plan falls through, and you believe nothing ever works out for you. Mind reading. This is when you assume you know exactly what other people are thinking with zero actual evidence. Someone looks at you strangely, and you're convinced they hate you. A friend seems distant, and you're absolutely sure they're upset with you. But you don't actually know what's going on in their head. You're just projecting your fears onto them, catastrophizing. This is when you take a small problem and blow it up into a complete disaster in your mind. You make one mistake, and suddenly your entire life is ruined. You have one awkward conversation, and you're convinced your reputation is destroyed forever. Your mind skips over all the middle possibilities and jumps straight to the absolute worst-case scenario. Once you learn to recognize these patterns, they lose their power over you, because you start seeing them for what they are: habits. Mental shortcuts your brain has developed over time, and habits can be changed with awareness and practice. Here's where it gets really interesting and liberating. Dr. Marsh emphasizes that CBT isn't about fighting your thoughts or going to war with your mind. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with your thoughts. Most people are at war with their own minds. They hate their anxious thoughts. They try desperately to suppress them, push them away, pretend they're not there. But that doesn't work. In fact, it usually makes things significantly worse because the more you try not to think about something, the more it dominates your attention. Instead, CBT teaches you to observe your thoughts, to create a little distance between you and them, to recognize that you are not your thoughts. You are the one observing your thoughts. That distinction is absolutely everything. When you identify completely with your thoughts, every thought shakes you to your core. When you observe your thoughts with some distance, they become just mental events passing through your consciousness. Imagine you're standing on the side of a highway watching cars drive by. Some cars are sleek and beautiful. Some are beaten up and rusty. But you don't chase after every car that passes. You don't grab onto them and let them drag you down the road. You just watch them pass by. That's what you can learn to do with thoughts. They come. You acknowledge them, and you let them go. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to act on them. You don't have to let them define you. This doesn't mean you ignore real problems or dismiss valid concerns. It means you stop treating every thought like an emergency. You stop giving every worry equal weight. You develop discernment. You learn to tell the difference between a thought that deserves your attention and engagement, and a thought that's just mental noise. Dr. Marsh talks about the concept of thought diffusion. This is a technique where you create distance from a thought by changing how you relate to it linguistically. Instead of thinking, I am a failure, you think, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. See the subtle but powerful difference? One statement is an identity, a definition of who you are. The other is an observation of a mental event happening. One feels permanent and absolute. The other feels temporary and flexible. You can even take it further. I notice my mind is telling me I'm a failure. Now you've created even more distance. Now it's absolutely clear that this is just your mind doing its thing, generating thoughts, not a reflection of who you actually are as a person. When you practice this consistently, something amazing happens. Thoughts that used to devastate you completely start to lose their grip. They still show up, sure, but they don't control you anymore, because you stopped believing everything your mind tells you. Let's talk about a common thought pattern that almost everyone struggles with at some point. What if? What if this goes wrong? What if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if everything falls apart? What if questions feel like you're being prepared, like you're planning ahead responsibly, but really you're just torturing yourself with hypotheticals, with imaginary scenarios? CBT helps you recognize that what if is almost never based on present reality. It's a prediction, a guess, a story about a future that doesn't exist yet. And here's the kicker. Studies show that the vast majority of the things we worry about never actually happen. And when they do happen, they're usually way less serious than we imagined. So when a what-if thought pops up, CBT teaches you to ask, is this a fact or is this just a possibility? And if it's just a possibility, how likely is it really based on actual evidence? And even if it does happen, can I handle it? Most of the time, the honest answer is, it's unlikely, and yes, you could handle it if it did happen. And just recognizing that reduces the intensity of the anxiety dramatically. Dr. Marsh also emphasizes the critical importance of self-compassion in this entire process. CBT isn't about beating yourself up for having anxious thoughts. It's not about calling yourself stupid for worrying. It's about gently, kindly questioning those thoughts like you would with a friend who's spiraling. You wouldn't yell at them. You'd say, hey, let's look at this together calmly. Is this really as catastrophic as it seems right now? That's the tone you want to have with yourself. Supportive, curious, patient, compassionate. Over time, as you practice this consistently, your mind starts to learn. It stops generating as many exaggerated, catastrophic thoughts because it's learned through experience that those thoughts don't hold up under scrutiny. It's like training a muscle. The more you question your thoughts, the stronger your rational mind becomes. The more you practice stepping back and observing, the quieter the mental noise gets. And here's the beautiful part. You don't become some emotionless robot. You don't stop feeling. You just stop being completely controlled by every feeling. You learn that you can feel anxious and still function. You can have the thought, I might fail, and still take action. You can feel uncertain and still move forward with courage. CBT as a tool for inquiry teaches you that a quiet mind isn't an empty mind. It's a mind where thoughts exist, but chaos doesn't. It's a mind where you're in conversation with your thoughts, not at war with them. It's a mind where you're the observer, not the prisoner. And when you master that fundamental shift, you step into a kind of freedom most people never experience. The freedom to think without being destroyed by your thoughts. The freedom to feel without being overwhelmed by your feelings. The freedom to live without being paralyzed by fear. That's the power of inquiry. That's the gift of questioning instead of blindly believing. That's what happens when you stop fighting your mind and start understanding it with curiosity and compassion. Now let me ask you something profound. Who do you talk to the most in your entire life? Your partner, your best friend, your co-workers, your family? Actually, none of them. The person you talk to the most, by far, is yourself. And I'm not talking about out-loud conversations. I'm talking about that constant internal dialogue that runs in the background of your mind from the moment you wake up until the moment you finally fall asleep. I can't believe I said that. Why am I so awkward? I should have done better. They probably think I'm stupid. I'm never going to get this right. This voice never stops. It comments on everything you do, every decision you make, every interaction you have. And here's the deeply uncomfortable truth. For most people, that voice is cruel. It's harsh. It's relentlessly unforgiving. It's the kind of voice you would never tolerate from another person. But because it's coming from inside your own head, you accept it. You believe it. You let it define you. Dr. Marsh says that one of the most transformative things you can do for your mental health is to fundamentally change the way you talk to yourself. Not by pretending everything is perfect. Not by lying to yourself with toxic positivity, but by treating yourself with the same kindness, patience, and encouragement you would naturally offer to someone you genuinely care about. She calls this becoming your own advocate. Now, before you dismiss this as cheesy or unrealistic, hear me out. This isn't about standing in front of a mirror saying affirmations that you don't believe. This isn't about faking confidence you don't have or pretending you don't have weaknesses. This is about fundamentally shifting the tone of your internal dialogue from one of constant criticism and judgment to one of support and compassion. Because here's the reality. The way you talk to yourself shapes your reality. It shapes your confidence. It shapes your decisions. It shapes how you show up in the world and what you believe is possible for you. If your internal voice is constantly telling you that you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, that you don't deserve good things, guess what? That becomes your identity. Not because it's true, but because you've repeated it to yourself so many times that your brain accepts it as fact. Let's talk about the inner critic that lives in all of us. Everyone has one. It's that voice that pops up the instant something goes wrong. You make a mistake at work, and immediately the voice says, "You're so incompetent. Everyone's going to think you're an idiot." You have an awkward social interaction, and the voice says, "You're so weird. Why can't you just be normal like everyone else?" You see someone doing better than you, and the voice says, "You're so far behind, you'll never catch up. You might as well give up now." This voice is so familiar, so constant, that most people don't even question it anymore. They assume it's just being realistic or keeping them in check. They think that being hard on themselves is what pushes them to improve, what prevents them from becoming lazy or complacent. But here's what research actually shows. Self-criticism doesn't motivate growth. It creates fear, shame, and paralysis. It doesn't make you work harder or perform better. It makes you want to give up entirely. Think about it logically. If you had a coach who constantly told you that you were terrible, that you'd never succeed, that you should just quit, would that motivate you? Of course not. You'd fire that coach immediately. But that's exactly the kind of coaching most people give themselves every single day of their lives. Part 5. Integration and Conclusion. Building your quiet mind. Now let me introduce you to a concept Dr. Marsh uses that I think is absolutely brilliant. She says, imagine you're the CEO of your own life. A CEO's job is to protect and promote the company. They wouldn't go around telling everyone that their product is garbage. They wouldn't sabotage their own company by spreading negative messages about it publicly or internally. They'd be strategic, supportive, and focused on highlighting strengths while systematically working on weaknesses. That's exactly what you need to do for yourself. You need to become the CEO of your own life, the manager of your own internal brand, and right now, most people are terrible CEOs. They're constantly undermining themselves, criticizing themselves relentlessly, pointing out every flaw and mistake with brutal precision. They're running an aggressive smear campaign against themselves in their own minds. Now, here's where people get confused and resistant. They think that being your own advocate means lying to yourself. It means pretending you're perfect when you're clearly not. It means ignoring your mistakes or refusing to acknowledge areas where you genuinely need to grow. But that's not what this is about at all. An advocate is both realistic and supportive simultaneously. It's the crucial difference between saying, "I'm a complete failure at everything," and saying, "I made a mistake and I can learn from this experience." It's the difference between saying, "I'm so stupid," and saying, "That was a tough situation, and I didn't handle it the way I wanted to. Next time, I'll try a different approach." See the fundamental difference? Both statements acknowledge the problem or the mistake, but one completely destroys you and your sense of self, and one empowers you to learn and grow. Here's a question Dr. Marsh asks that stopped me completely in my tracks when I first heard it. If your best friend came to you after failing an important exam, what would you say to them? Would you say, "You're worthless. You'll never succeed at anything. You should just give up now"? Of course not. That would be cruel and ridiculous. You'd say something like, "Hey, that exam was really challenging. You studied hard and that effort matters. Let's figure out what went wrong and come up with a better strategy for next time. So why don't you talk to yourself that way? Why is it that you can be compassionate, understanding, and genuinely encouraging to everyone else in your life, but when it comes to yourself, you're absolutely brutal? What makes you think you deserve less kindness than the people around you? What makes you an exception to basic human compassion? Most people have never actually thought about this consciously. They've just accepted that being harsh with themselves is normal, that it's just how things are. But it's not normal, and it's costing you your peace of mind. Let me tell you what happens when you start practicing supportive self-talk consistently. At first, it feels completely fake. Your inner critic has been running the show for so long, maybe your entire life, that any other voice feels foreign and artificial. You'll think things like, "This is stupid. I don't believe this. I'm just lying to myself. This is pointless." And that's okay. That's completely normal. You're not going to undo decades of ingrained negative self-talk overnight. It's unrealistic to expect that. But if you stick with it, if you keep practicing even when it feels awkward, something shifts gradually. The first step is simple awareness. You have to start noticing how you talk to yourself. Most people are on complete autopilot. They don't even realize how harsh their internal dialogue is until they start paying deliberate attention. So here's what I want you to do for the next few days. Just observe. When something goes wrong, when you make a mistake, when you feel embarrassed, when you're disappointed in yourself, pause. Listen carefully to what your mind is saying. Write it down if you can. I promise you, when you actually see it written out in front of you, you'll be shocked at how cruel it is. You'll see patterns. You'll see the same harsh insults repeated over and over, and you'll start to realize that this isn't truth. This is just a deeply ingrained habit, a very old, very destructive habit. But habits can be changed with consistent practice. Once you have awareness, the next step is intervention. When you catch your inner critic being harsh, don't just let it keep going unchallenged. You interrupt it. You challenge it directly. You say, "Wait, is that actually true? Would I say this to someone I care about? Is there a kinder, more helpful way to frame this situation?" Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you forgot an important meeting at work. Your inner critic immediately jumps in aggressively. "You're so irresponsible. You can't even remember basic things. You're going to get fired. Everyone thinks you're completely incompetent." Now pause. Challenge that narrative. Ask yourself, is that actually true? Have I forgotten meetings before? Or is this a rare mistake? Does one forgotten meeting mean I'm completely irresponsible? Or does it mean I'm human and I made an error? If your friend forgot a meeting, would you tell them they're worthless? Or would you tell them it happens to everyone and they should just apologize and reschedule? When you slow down and actually question the narrative, you realize how exaggerated and unfair it is. And then you can replace it with something more balanced and realistic. "I forgot the meeting, and that's not ideal. I'll apologize sincerely, reschedule, and set a reminder so it doesn't happen again." This doesn't define me as a person or a professional. See how that feels different? It's still acknowledging the mistake, honestly. But it's not catastrophizing. It's not turning a small error into a character assassination. Dr. Marsh, talks extensively about the language we use with ourselves because words genuinely matter. Words aren't just sounds or symbols. They're instructions to your brain. Your brain listens carefully to the words you use and treats them as truth, as reality. If you constantly say, "I always mess things up," your brain starts actively looking for evidence to support that statement. It starts filtering your experiences through that lens. And before you know it, you've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the empowering news. It works both ways. If you start using more compassionate, realistic language with yourself, your brain starts to believe that too. Not because you're lying to yourself, but because you're highlighting the full picture instead of only focusing relentlessly on the negative. One of the biggest changes people notice when they start being genuinely kinder to themselves is that failure becomes less terrifying. When your entire self-worth is tied to never making mistakes, every failure feels like the end of the world. You avoid taking risks because you can't handle the thought of messing up. You play small because it feels safer. But when you learn to treat yourself with compassion even when things go wrong, failure becomes just feedback. It becomes valuable information, not utter devastation. You start seeing yourself as someone who tries, who learns, who grows regardless of the outcome. And that shift is incredibly freeing because now your value isn't dependent on being perfect. It's dependent on being human. And humans make mistakes. That's not a flaw. That's just the nature of being alive and learning. Let me share something personal for a moment. I used to have the loudest, most vicious inner critic. Every mistake I made, I would replay it obsessively in my head, each time adding more brutal commentary about how stupid I was, how I should have known better, how I was always like this. It was absolutely exhausting, and it didn't make me better at anything. It just made me more anxious, more hesitant, more afraid to try new things. But when I started practicing what Dr. Marsh teaches, when I started catching that voice and deliberately replacing it with something kinder, everything changed. Not overnight, but gradually, steadily. I started taking more risks because I knew that even if I failed, I wouldn't destroy myself over it. I started being more present in conversations because I wasn't constantly judging every word that came out of my mouth. I started enjoying my life more because I wasn't living under the constant crushing weight of self-criticism. And here's the thing. I didn't become delusional. I didn't start thinking I was perfect at everything. I just stopped being my own worst enemy. I became my own ally. And that made all the difference. Your inner advocate isn't someone who tells you you're amazing at everything regardless of reality. It's someone who reminds you that you're doing your best, that you're learning, that you're worthy of kindness even when you mess up. It's the voice that says, "You've got this," not because success is guaranteed, but because you're capable of handling whatever comes your way. So here's what I want you to start doing immediately. Every time you catch your inner critic being harsh, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what would I say to a friend in this exact situation? Then say that to yourself. It might feel awkward at first. It might feel fake or forced. But keep doing it anyway because over time, that new voice will start to feel more natural, more authentic. And the old cruel voice will start to fade into the background. You deserve to have someone in your corner, And if no one else is there right now, you can be. You should be. Because the relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for every other relationship in your life. If you're constantly at war with yourself, you can't fully show up for anyone else. But when you're at peace with yourself, when you're your own supporter instead of your own saboteur, everything shifts fundamentally. This isn't about arrogance. It's about basic respect, self-respect, the kind of respect that says, I'm human, I'm flawed, I'm learning, and I'm worthy of kindness from others and from myself. So let's make a commitment right now together. For the next week, pay close attention to your self-talk. Notice when the inner critic shows up, and every time it does, challenge it. Replace it with something kinder, something more realistic, something more supportive. It won't be easy. Old habits die hard, especially ones we've practiced for decades. But you're worth the effort. Because here's the truth. You've been listening to that critical voice for years, maybe your entire life. And it hasn't made you happier. It hasn't made you more successful. It's just made you tired and afraid. So maybe it's time to try something radically different. Maybe it's time to become the voice that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. Maybe it's time to become your own advocate. So here we are. We've journeyed together through letting go of what you fundamentally cannot control. We've explored focusing on action instead of obsessing over outcomes. We've learned the art of slowing down in a world that glorifies frantic speed. We've discovered how to question our thoughts instead of blindly believing them. And we've talked about the transformative power of becoming your own advocate. All of these pieces work together intricately. They're not separate, isolated strategies. They're different aspects of the same fundamental truth. Peace comes from within, not from external achievements, not from other people's approval, not from having everything figured out. From within. A quiet mind isn't a mind without thoughts. That's impossible and wouldn't even be desirable. It's a mind that isn't controlled by thoughts. It's a mind that can observe, question, and choose consciously. It's a mind that treats itself with kindness instead of cruelty. It's a mind that focuses on what it can control and releases what it can't. It's a mind that moves through life with clear intention instead of chronic anxiety. This is the art Dr. Helena Marsh is teaching us, and it's an art worth dedicating yourself to mastering, because when you cultivate genuine inner peace, everything else becomes easier and more manageable. Relationships improve because you're not projecting your inner chaos onto others. Work becomes more fulfilling because you're not constantly doubting yourself. Challenges become manageable because you're not adding layers of self-criticism on top of them. You start showing up as the fullest version of yourself, not perfect, not without flaws, but whole, integrated, at peace. So I want to leave you with this final thought. The journey to a quiet mind isn't about reaching some perfect destination where you never feel anxious again, where you never doubt yourself, where everything is always calm and peaceful. That's not realistic. That's not how life works. Life is messy. Emotions are messy. Being human is inherently messy. But you can learn to navigate that mess with grace, with compassion, with wisdom. You can learn to be your own anchor in the storm instead of waiting for external circumstances to calm down. You can learn to trust yourself support yourself, and show up for yourself in ways that maybe no one ever taught you how to do. That's what this entire journey has been about, and I hope wherever you are right now, whatever you're going through, you feel a little more equipped, a little more hopeful, a little more ready to build that quiet mind you've been searching for. The work you do on yourself, the work of building a quiet mind, isn't just for you. It ripples outward in ways you can't even imagine. When you're at peace with yourself, you show up differently in your relationships. You're more patient, more present, more genuinely compassionate. When you stop projecting your inner chaos onto the people around you, your connections deepen, your conflicts decrease, your capacity for authentic love expands. When you're at peace with yourself, you make better decisions. You're not operating from fear or desperation anymore. You're operating from clarity and intention. And better decisions lead to better outcomes, which lead to a better life. When you're at peace with yourself, you become a light for others. People see it, they feel it, and sometimes without even trying, without even intending to, you inspire them to do their own inner work. You give them permission to be human, to struggle, to heal. Your peace becomes contagious in the best possible way. So the journey to a quiet mind isn't selfish at all. It's one of the most generous things you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose life you touch. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for being open to these ideas, for being willing to look inward, to question, to grow. That takes real courage. That takes humility. That takes hope. And all of those qualities are already inside you. You just needed to be reminded that they're there. Go forth with kindness toward yourself and toward others. Go forth with awareness of your thoughts, your patterns, your genuine power. Go forth with intention, choosing peace over chaos, action over worry, compassion over criticism. Your quiet mind is waiting for you. Not somewhere out there in the distant future, right here, right now, in this present moment, in the next breath you take, in the next choice you make. It's yours. Claim it. The practices we've explored aren't complicated, but they are profound. Letting go of the uncontrollable, focusing on action over outcome, slowing down intentionally, questioning your thoughts, being your own advocate. These aren't just concepts to understand intellectually. These are practices to live by, tools to return to again and again when life gets overwhelming and chaotic. We started with letting go of the uncontrollable, and we learned that most of our mental noise comes from desperately trying to control things that were never ours to control in the first place. Other people's opinions, the past that's already happened, outcomes that depend on 1,000 variables beyond us. We learned that letting go isn't weakness or passivity. It's profound wisdom. It's the recognition that our power lies not in controlling external circumstances, but in consciously choosing our response to them. When you release your desperate grip on the uncontrollable, you finally gain control over the one thing that matters most, your own peace of mind. Then we explored action over outcome. We discovered that anxiety lives in the future, in the what-ifs and the catastrophic predictions our minds love to create endlessly. But action lives in the present moment. When you shift your focus from obsessing over results to fully engaging with what you're doing right now, anxiety loses its grip. You stop being paralyzed by fear of failure because your identity is no longer tied to outcomes. It's tied to effort, to showing up, to doing your best with what you have. And that shift from outcome-obsessed to action-focused transforms not just your productivity, but your entire relationship with stress and pressure. We dove into the art of slowing down in a world that glorifies speed and constant busyness. We learned that true peace comes from intentionally decelerating, not just your body, but your mind, slowing down your thoughts, creating space between stimulus and response, learning to be fully present instead of constantly racing ahead. We discovered that the most meaningful experiences in life require slowness. They require depth. And you can't have depth when you're skimming across the surface at 100 miles per hour. Then came CBT as a tool for inquiry. We learned that our thoughts aren't facts, they're interpretations, stories our minds tell based on fear, past experiences, and cognitive shortcuts. And instead of blindly believing every thought that pops into our heads, we can question them, put them on trial, ask for evidence. This practice of inquiry doesn't make you cynical or disconnected. It makes you free. Free from the tyranny of catastrophic thinking, free from the prison of self-doubt, free to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. And finally, we explored becoming your own advocate. We confronted the harsh reality that most of us have an inner critic that's relentlessly cruel, constantly tearing us down. And we learned that you can't build a peaceful life on a foundation of self-hatred and constant criticism. Self-compassion isn't self-indulgence or weakness. It's the fuel for sustainable growth. It's what allows you to take risks, to fail, to learn, and to keep going. When you become your own supporter instead of your own saboteur, everything changes. Not because you become arrogant or delusional, but because you finally treat yourself with the same kindness you'd naturally offer to anyone else you genuinely care about. All of these pieces work together synergistically. They're not isolated techniques you use separately. They're interconnected practices that build on each other and reinforce each other. When you let go of the uncontrollable, you have more energy to focus on your actions. When you focus on action instead of outcome, you naturally slow down and become more present. When you slow down, you create space to question your thoughts. And when you question your thoughts with compassion instead of harsh criticism, you cultivate that inner advocate who supports you through everything. This is the architecture of a quiet mind. This is the foundation of lasting peace. Now, I want to be completely real with you for a moment. If you're expecting that after learning all this, your anxiety will disappear forever, that you'll never have another negative thought, that life will suddenly become easy and simple, that's not going to happen. That's not how this works. That's not how being human works. You're still going to have difficult days. You're still going to face real challenges. You're still going to feel anxious sometimes, doubt yourself sometimes, get caught up in mental noise sometimes. But here's what will fundamentally change. You'll have tools, you'll have awareness, you'll have practices to return to when things get hard. And most importantly, you'll have a completely different relationship with those difficult moments. Instead of being destroyed by them, you'll be able to navigate through them. Instead of adding layers of self-criticism on top of your struggles, you'll be able to meet yourself with compassion. Instead of feeling helpless and overwhelmed, you'll remember that you have agency, you have choice, you have power. The quiet mind that Dr. Marsh talks about isn't a destination you reach and then you're done forever. It's a practice you return to again and again. Some days you'll feel incredibly peaceful. You'll catch yourself and think, wow, I've really changed fundamentally. Other days, you'll slip back into old patterns. You'll overthink. You'll criticize yourself harshly. You'll try to control things you can't control. And you might feel like you've lost all your progress. But you haven't. Because even recognizing that you've slipped is progress. Even knowing there's another way to be is progress. Even having the tools to get back on track is significant progress. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't linear. And peace isn't something you achieve once and then maintain effortlessly forever. It's something you choose over and over in small moments throughout your day. So, what do you do now? How do you take everything we've talked about and actually apply it to your real life? Start small. Don't try to overhaul your entire mindset overnight. That's overwhelming and sets you up for failure. Pick one practice that resonated with you most deeply. Maybe it's the practice of questioning your thoughts before believing them. Maybe it's the practice of catching your inner critic and replacing it with something kinder. Maybe it's the practice of asking yourself, what can I do right now when anxiety hits? Pick one and commit to practicing it consistently for a week. Just 1 week. See what happens, notice what shifts, and then build from there. Add another practice. Layer them on top of each other gradually. Be patient with yourself throughout this process. This is a marathon, not a sprint. You've spent years, maybe decades, building the mental habits you have now. It's going to take time to build new ones. But every single effort counts. Every time you choose curiosity over judgment, action over worry, compassion over criticism, you're rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways. You're becoming a different person. Your quiet mind is waiting for you, not somewhere out there in the future, right here, right now. Claim it.